We're live. It's Friday. Oh my gosh, you guys, August. Who can imagine August the 1st today? Oh, holy Hannah. Go figure. We all made it through that July. It was a hot July. It was pretty intense for a lot of people, wasn't it? Thank you for joining me. I'm karenann macdonald. This is our frequency Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific. So I'm glad you're here to join us. And if you're going to catch it on the replay, we're very happy that you're going to catch it on the replay. So there's so much stuff that has happened. Oh my gosh, where to start this week? Let's get a little bit about what's been going on. One of the things that we've been seeing is everyone's talking about, I was listening to Carrie Cassidy, I was listening to David Sarita, I was listening to Dr. Avi, I was looking to Jimmy Blanchard. Who isn't talking about the Atlas I, the 3, the 31 coming in? So if you guys haven't seen what we're talking about, I want you to go take a look at that. We have got identified or unidentified comet, ships, asteroids, whatever it is, hanging out. They're going to try and figure out what's coming up in the next couple months. People are speculating it's coming in faster. It does not look like it's actually something that's natural. It's got even NASA and all the scientists combobulated. So we'll just leave it there. They can be combobulated. So a lot of people are guessing. I doubt it's Nibiru. If you talk to people on the inside, they go, Pisha. That's not it. So anyway, I want you to take a look at it. David Sarita's got some interesting aspects on it. And again, with Jimmy Blanchard, many, many years ago, they started sending signals out and started receiving signals back, you guys. So if you haven't looked at David Sarita, take a look at that, because there's some very interesting speculation as to what's coming around. If it's coming into our solar system, then just like anything that we're getting, it's creating waves, and those waves are coming in from, the central sun and the core and everything else, and through those gates. So as it creates waves, whether you see it, oscillating, whether you don't, it's creating things onto the planet. So there's some talk, is this actually what's going on? So those are some of the things I thought I'd kind of throw by you and see if you were aware of it. But this is where the talk is. And of course, how many of you experienced anything or know people that have experienced anything to do with the 8.8 with that? We've got tsunamis coming in, the volcanoes. If you haven't looked, I actually felt that here in our fault line on Tuesday afternoon. I was sitting there just vibrating like this, and I don't do coffee during the day, all that stuff, kind of thing. So I was shaking in the feet, the hands, the whole thing. There was a slight vibration to my house, and I went, is this a 6G? Are they playing with 7G? What are they playing with today? And sure as crap, you open up, and this is what's happened. We saw, again, with the Russian quakes that just happened to happen between Russia, Alaska, and again, those waves go around the Pacific Ring. So it's just like a bathtub, oscillator. Once you drop a, stone into the puddle, into that pond, the ripple effects were being affected everywhere. And people were getting anywhere from 1 to 4, 5, 6 feet of waves easily. So the tsunamis were coming in. So again, this affects everything. That's what quantum entanglement is. That's what bioresonance is that we are all connected. So I actually felt what was going on Tuesday afternoon. So if you guys are on a fault line, you may have felt it a little bit more. So never question, what your guts are telling you, anything else. So thanks, Carolee. How are you doing today? Enjoying Friday? So one of the things as well is we want to make sure that when these things happen, we are seeing extra volcanoes. They're all steaming and venting. So if you guys aren't aware, there's lots of volcanoes going off right now. And this is creating pressure points and, release in different areas. So there's some talk too. Are we connected to this? Is this connected to the feminine that we're getting rid of again? Actually, it was very interesting. I was listening to Sasha Stone and again, David Sarita and Dr. Allison and stuff like that had a talk on the Lazarus Initiative. And she, as a geophysicist and geologist, kind of like Stephen Burns, but she's a volcanist and she studies volcanoes and stuff, but they're looking at where they are on the ley lines. And she said, what if this is a feminine thing and we're actually blowing off steam? All of us women, we've had enough. And it's Gaia's way of this is enough crap already. And so it was very interesting. And we started looking at and mapping some of the different things where these also pyramids were in the ley lines. So take a look at that. But when this is going off, we are seeing, for example, Mount Rainier is steaming and venting. And we know that the actual radiation, the actual forces are up there with their nuclear planes sniffing. They're called sniffers. So they're going, because they're trying to detect to see if they can find any traces of radiation or chemicals changes in the environment. And I think this is actually what's going on in here. So because of that, and today I just got off, I'm actually doing one of the girls in Montreal right now. What's really interesting is that everyone's talking that they feel prickly. So I talked to one of the girls. I was in Georgia today. I've talked to girls all over the place. And a lot of my clients are talking that their skin feels prickly, or there's something underneath, or like a little heat stroke. So these pricklies, everyone describes it slightly different, can be that radiation going off. And so this is something that we want to be looking after, because again, these are real things. There are side effects. Things get, released into the air, just like air pollution and heavy metals and particulates. So these are things that you want to, make sure that you've got things like aloe vera, lavender, putting things like this on, something like a natural SPF factor. So if you've got shea butter or carrot seed essential oil, these are things that you want to do. So take a look at that. So Topaz says, oh, wow. Interesting. I've been blowing off a lot of steam lately too, and Nanette's in here too. Welcome. So these are some of the very critical things that we're looking at. And I want you to bear in mind, and one of the best things I've always said are things like apple pectin, rhodiola, essential oils, and my number one thing for radiation, if you guys want to guess, is aloe vera. Aloe vera is a superfood. And what I've found in each and every case for the last 5-6 years, actually probably 10 years, when we saw things starting to blow off. So it doesn't matter if it's ionizing or non-ionizing radiation, is to have not only aloe vera plants that you can literally cut up, but literally you can buy inner fillet and basically either gel or juice. So you're basically juicing the cactus. And so if you want to do that, make sure that you've got aloe vera juice. And this is something I've noticed has been a big difference. It's been a game changer. A lot of people have been feeling a little achy too, because the more radiation, the more you kind of feel joints, a little bit achy, brain foggy, that type of thing. And I'm no different. So one of the things I decided to do was go back to an old, tested, time-proven formula. And what I do is I take about half a teaspoon of baking soda, clean, half a teaspoon of MSM. And again, that's a sulfur powder, but MSM and a little bit of bioxy, and you can put a little bit of borax in there if you want. And what I've been doing is taking these little bits of white powder, and I put a little bit of lemon juice, and it gets all nice and fuzzy and oxidated and all that kind of fun stuff. Add some water, and then you can add a little bit of either, if you want, molasses or stevia or agave or maple syrup or something like that to your taste. Some people do even a little bit of honey. So one of those things I noticed has been a big difference. So after 2-3 days, it's going to take about 72 hours to start getting your system. And I went, wow, I'm actually standing and there's no joint pain today. What is that? And I went, wow, it's that extra little bit of sulfur. So a great thing to have in your repertoire, you guys. Okay, so it's not just about alkalization. It's about getting those alkaline, magnesium, sulfur, and the bicarbonate. So that's a really, time-proven thing that you guys can do, and see how that mixes up with you. So anyway, take a look at that. That was one of my fun things. As you can see, actually, I'm just doing someone, as I mentioned here, who will remain kind of nameless here. But one of the things that we're seeing here in the background, when I bring this up, is that you're seeing a lot of these different, and I just had someone cleared off the other day, and it's back to a brown orangey ring. One of the things I will find with a lot of the clients is that when you see things, let's say with radiation and stuff like that, is that basically we are going to start having that effect. And you will start seeing that the outer ring is being disseminated. It's being attacked when we're under attack. And that's what people that have targeted individuals, you also see that brown gray ring that you'll see quite often with what you call shedding, or Klingons or entities, or call it whatever we want. Loosh harvesting. So we want to take a look at that. So, we did probably about 2 hours with a client the other day. It was just absolutely impeccably gorgeous by the time I was done. Now, one of the things is they're feeling prickly again. They feel like there's things hanging on. And again, one of the things I always question, this something happened with the client as well today, is that they told me they had been doing, and I don't know, do you guys know what Kambo is? Kambo. Do you guys in the audience know what Kambo is? Let me know if you do. Just put yes or no. So Kambo, if you're not aware of it, is actually a toad venom. And it's used Amazonian, but it's used a lot actually in North America with shamans and pseudo shamans. Okay, so we see a lot of things like peyote, iboga, San Pedro, all sorts of things along this line, ayahuasca. And if you haven't heard about the actual frog medicine, they literally cut themselves open and they inject. And you'll quite often see that they'll have different marks up in here, and they will actually put the frog venom in. And what happens is the idea is that you are using it as an antitoxin, but it can also be a psychedelic. And so some people feel, I think at some point they get to a certain level and it will work for certain conditions or chelate out certain things or used as a purgative, right? I think there's sometimes a lot better things that we could be using out there. Myself, I've also noticed that I can like muscle tests, and I find at some point, and I there are some people I know that have done like 100-200 of these, again, ceremonies, and their underlying conditions are still there. So if they had a lot of tattoos, I'm seeing a lot of people with tattoo toxicity right now. Unbelievable, the heavy metals and the paints and the dyes getting into the system, into the lymphatics, into the blood, and it's leaching through there. So as weird as it is, I've actually seen it come through with women in their, rather than having their menstruation turn red or dark red, it's turning the colors of the actual dyes from their tattoo, which is not pretty. So it's literally like, they're putting the dye in here and it's coming out another end. So those are one of the things to take a look at. So like I said, be aware of some of these things, because, sometimes we don't talk that much about it, or it's kept in sort of more basic kind of things, what's going on. But the Kambo is actually used from the secretions, of there. And it's this giant leaf frog. So like I said, you can actually start getting tachycardia, nausea, vomiting. So is it really boosting the health when we start seeing side effects? I've always questioned that, because again, if we were meant to have it, we would have actually some of those markers in our systems. So it was used a lot with, depression, anxiety, fever, mental clarity, or is it putting them into just a different altered state? It's almost like creating, in a sense, sometimes almost like, I think, more of a split off, almost like an alter, similar to multiple personality, just to the point that you're not dealing with it or don't have to deal with it. But make no mistake that these things have, and they've put people into acute renal, like kidney failure, like where you have to go into dialysis, pancreas, so they've become basically diabetics, liver damage, hepatitis has been known, seizures in some case. And we did actually have some, when people were supposedly, practicing this indigenous people's Amazonian medicine, it's not for everyone. And I do know that in a lot of the areas when I've dealt with matriarchs, that's for those matriarchs. And as you know, we've got different chakra points and there are different areas of the world. It's for those people there. We have been subjected, I think, for the most part, to too much toxins up here compared to what we'll see in Portugal or the Brazilian rainforest or some of these different things. But this becomes a bit of a problem in some of these things. So once you start getting into the Brazilian Amazon, our genetics are not from there. That's why traditional Chinese medicine, I will do with more if you're European or going into some of those Asian things, because it's more for those genetics. So like I said, always, catching this, frog venom, they basically, put these things like these small burns are created in the skin, and a small dose of these frog or, toxic secretions are then injected in there. Now, again, some people way back when claimed that, it used to be used for fertility, but I think we've got a lot better things in here. But this is interesting. So not only did they use these kind of psychedelics to not only get rid of the bad spirits or the entities, but they used it to also induce abortion. So think of what it's really doing to the women when you're putting a woman into that kind of automatic, almost like a hemorrhagic or anaphylactic shock. So like I said, this is done quite often. They put them into rooms or kind of like sweat lodges, or again, I always have a problem with them saying it's a ceremony room. Ceremony was actually done really as a marriage or premarital arrangements, like sacred sites. So I have a problem when people start throwing around what's a sacred ceremony. Just because you're getting around and doing this doesn't make it so. So again, these are some of the things in here that you need to be aware of. And I think a lot of people just get into the whole marketing idea, or they get caught up into this frenzy of stuff, or into their groups. Oh, this is going to be a spiritual thing and all the shamans are doing it, or it's complementary alternative medicine. Well, there are side effects to this, and let's take a look at that. It also has an impact literally on the environment with what they're doing, and putting these different species also at risk too. And within this is where people are missing this stuff. So if we've talked about the ostriches up here, but what we call zoonotics, and that is where actually parasites transfer from one species to another, not just having like a sexually transmitted disease parasite, but you get this in between species as well. So who's going to be sitting there looking to see, wow, did you actually get this little nematode? Did you get this little other parasite? This is not unusual. And people forget all about this. And there have been people that have died and had cardiac arrest. Like I said, brain edema, swelling of the brain has been known to happen in here too. A lot of these supposedly festivals have happened, and, they actually have perforated their esophagus because they were constantly vomiting and purging and, doing this type of thing here. So like I said, just to be very, very aware of that. So sometimes not the biggest one, but a little bit clay water, or watering it down, or using different things. Sometimes people have used even activated charcoal in here, or doing things like that. There's a lot to be said for using other forms of medicine here. So as long as you're aware of it, that's what we just need to go into. So I'm just going to put that in here a little bit because, like I said, a lot of people aren't aware of it. If you're not even kind of with what the crowd's doing in the psychedelics, this may be a whole foreign thing to a lot of people if you're not aware of it, right? So I'm going to put it into the live stream here so you can take a look at it there. So this is what we're talking about a little bit, is using some of these psychedelics for different methodologies. So Margaret Walker's in there. Hello, it's me again. It's Margaret. Nice to see you guys. Mary's in here and stuff too. So that's what we're talking a little bit about today, is looking at other options. Now, it was interesting. I was in a couple different shows lately, and one is called Dorian he's called The Mind of Dabuma, Bomma. And he was on another site. Actually, they're running right now, I think, on YouTube and Twitter, is someone called Seven and then Sees, Sees. And then also a couple other people that were involved in there. So Sabrina Wallace was actually in the chat room. I was in about 2 or 3 chats monitoring that. So it's on her Synergy. But Sel was on there as well. And Rick Sikorsky and stuff. So people that are along that line. And so there's some major information. I put that, if you guys are not on my inner circle on Facebook, I'm going to put my group in here for my Facebook, because there's a lot of information that I'm blogging virtually every day. Everyone goes, where's your website? I said, I've got like about 10 by the time I'm done. I'm on Discord, I'm on Twitter, I'm on MeWe, I'm on LinkedIn, Telegram, and about 6 or 7 Facebook. So if that's not enough, that's more than enough for me to keep up with. Now, one of the things in here is, take a look at that inner circle if you're not part of my inner circle, because there's about 2,000 people out of probably about 40, 50,000 people that are just getting sometimes separated, more extra information. And you're allowed to post in there as well, by the way, so if you want. So those are some of the things in here that I think are really important. One of the things on here, and like I said, this Synergy information that Sabrina passed was insurmountable yesterday. Okay, so when you're starting to hear people that are even in some ways as well, she was going, exactly, or I didn't know that. And you could hear people going, oh my gosh, I'm going to start looking some of this up. So I'm going to put actually the actual link for you in. And this was off her Synergy channel. So it's going to be something that you need, seriously, pen and paper. Take some tea or some strong tea because you're going to need it on here. So I think this is one of the ones in here. And I'm going to put another one that she's done with what we call signage. And this one in here with the signage, I think that's something that sometimes people don't realize, like how much time we have invested over the years. A lot of us, for the last 10, 15 years, we're taking virtually all of our knowledge and our expertise in our particular areas and trying to download people. And again, this becomes an issue because we don't all speak the same language. I don't speak Sabrina's computer language or programming language. I have a surface level of it, but I can correlate it over very much. When they're talking about routers, I start thinking about the brain and the central nervous system. So there's actually almost an exact correlation to that. So, worth taking a look at. And I'm going to put the one that we have here on her Odyssey, the last one in here right now, because of the signage. Because sometimes when we put them on whiteboards or on posters, it's a little bit easier to follow when we're talking about the biofield. So in her case, she's talking about this biofield as you're seeing here. Okay, we emanate radiation. We emanate just like a wave. So just like we're in the center here, and what we're doing is we're actually then dropping, like a stone or a pebble into the middle of our pond. It creates those waves or a wake. And so this is actually what we're looking at. And unless, and again, some people see fractions of it. No one ever sees the whole biofield, I find. They have just different visuals. It's like not everyone's 20/20. It's got nothing to do with your 20/20 because you're seeing outside the visible spectrum a little bit, or you're seeing the colors here. I see colors on people on and off at different frequencies for different reasons. And again, you might see a certain segmented thing, or there are sounds. And this is what we're doing. We're bouncing sound waves off right now. Those are the isochronic tones here. And so they're not always very pleasant to listen to. That's why we usually do things with wind chimes and stuff. But this is something that's why I like taking a look at things like this. How else are we going to do this? If we didn't have some of the technology to be able to use electronics and magnetics in the appropriate circumstances, having the right intake, there's nothing wrong with taking a look at that, So these are the different things that you're looking at. This is actually what they call the body viewer in here. It's a 3D mapping or imaging. So very much like you guys are hearing about, the regen beds and isolation. So for people that need a visual on what's going on with the actual body or where we're focusing at, this allows the client to meditate, but also to teach a little bit of anatomy and physiology. We don't expect you to go through all those years I did for taking medicine, or taking nursing or taking pharmacology. But what it does allows anyone at any level, I don't care if you're 4 years old, I've had children come up and do this and do their chakras, or I've had a lot of my clients are in their 80s and 90s, by the way, using this technology. And I'm not the first one to go in here. So one of the things what you're doing is you're seeing where it's picking out and isolating those particular traditional Chinese medical acupuncture meridians. And so it gives you a visualization of where it's working at the time. So I think that's really cool here. Margaret's got an interesting thing. What have you got here? Like the blind ones describing an elephant story. It's painfully beautiful. That reminds me of a story. I'm going to bring up my elephant story. Way back in about 2008, 2009, I had a client of mine. She's just beautiful. She's just tall and 5'10" and one of the most gorgeous natural blondes I've ever met. Just a sweetheart, inside and out. And she was actually a former paramedic in Saskatoon. And she was just amazing. And a lot of these girls got into accidents. Plus then there would be trauma from what they'd seen. And so they came into me, and by that point, they all became, get this, reflexologists. They were all into doing essential oils, and they were changing their lives over. And they felt great because they weren't, again, when you put yourself into those kind of careers, I think there's a lot to be said that we're missing something, or that you become like an adrenaline junkie, or like fixes like. It's to me like the dead look after the dead and the living look after the living. Where you focus is where things happen. So one of the things that was really interesting with her, I had just finished some seminars with Dr. Richard Bartlett, who unfortunately just passed away, and I was just texting with his daughter, Justice Bartlett. And one of the things that we did in Matrix Energetic is we would feel different parts of the field. That's what you're doing in Reiki or Qigong or Tai Chi or any of these different modalities. Or like Sabrina will talk about, what are you doing to pylo-erect, like to get every one of these energies, every one of these little hairs or antennas standing up, right? So whether we call it block, shunt, and shield as her methodology, we would call it tube pointing, but we're feeling those fields, because if they're not vibrating or is dark red or brown, as opposed to a hot pink vibration, which is really light. So the denser you go and you see those red and orange and lower density waves that you would see in the biofield, that's what we're feeling is the denseness. And it was really interesting that my friend Leanne, when she came in, and I was feeling the field, and I picked up this thing, and all I said to her was like, Dumble the elephant. I said, I don't know why. I'm just feeling around her. And I got this thing, which made no sense to me at the time, about this big gray Dumbo the elephant, like Dumbo, whatever. And I'm like, she started crying. She literally fell to the floor in my clinic, and she cried hysterically for about 5 minutes. Finally, when we got her settled down a bit and she calmed down a bit, I said, what happened? I said, can you explain this to me? What was that thing that happened that triggered you? And she told me that for 2 weeks she'd been sleeping, and then she would wake up with this awful nightmare, and she would see herself in basically Africa holding a child by the hand, and they were like on a safari or whatever they were doing in Africa, and they were charged by elephants, and the child let go, and she couldn't grab the child quick enough, and the child ran off and was actually trampled by a gray elephant. And so the trauma, whether we see it happening or we believe it to be so, that trauma has got a negative charge. It's got a chemistry to it. It creates a negative or acidic. And this is what happens when we reframe it. Unless we take the charge off, that is how you have triggering or post-traumatic stress. Okay, so almost anything, you can see the worst thing in the world, but if you can take the charge off of it and bring it back to neutral, so that we don't have to forget something, but we sure as hell don't have to have that, taking you back to the pits of hell every time. And so these are huge things when I'm dealing with people also do with sexual abuse and ritual abuse, trauma. Abuse is very huge. Like I said, it doesn't have to be sexual, doesn't have to be physical. Emotional and mental and spiritual abuse can be just as traumatic, or even the perception that it happened. I've had lots of people too that even assumed, it used to be vogue. Everyone likes to blame something in childhood or some sort of abuse. And I found a lot of times it actually wasn't so. It was something that's been formulated, or everyone wants to relive these kind of traumas and all think that they're mediums and stuff. And it was interesting because once we did the essential oils, and I grabbed some lavender at the time, and I said, she felt abandoned. Like not only did the child abandon her, but she created that abandonment. And so I had lavender on me at the time. And this is something for you guys here. It's from Way Beyond Louise Hay stuff. It's from a book called Releasing Essential Patterns of Negative Emotions by Dr. Carolyn Mean, who is a chiropractor that worked primarily in conjunction with Dr. Gary Young, as I did back then. And what happened is we put it on the hips, on each one of her hips, and we started saying, we embrace all of life's experiences. And do you know what happened to her? Within minutes, she literally shook like we had reframed or rebooted it. And from that night, she never had another nightmare. So again, that is the huge thing in there that we have to look at. And it can be painful. But again, once you remove the charge, it's amazing what we can do. Oh, thank you, Margaret. It's beautiful how my neck scarf color matches my wallpaper screen. Pretty close, isn't it? My baby, my song. Yeah, the psyche, that's what it's all about here. And as you mentioned, the whole Dumble Disney movies. Again, they trigger a lot of people. And those are one of the things in here we know about as you study mind control and some of the awful things that were done through Montauk and Project Paperclip. And in this particular device, I have actually identified all these different mind control techniques and things that we call Wernicke's commands, okay, which is basically cult or deprogramming. And these are really, really huge things. So these are part of the things I do when I'm doing consultation or life coaching for those particular things. So I think it's really important for everyone to have essential oils, and why we do blends, or at least if you have got a library, you don't have a library, you want mine, or you can make yourself up. I usually suggest, because they were done with Dr. Gary Young and Dr. Brice Tahino, done by frequencies in the old days, you can certainly go in and put every blend, every single, and use every company if you want. So if you want to use Young Living or doTERRA, go right ahead. I think it's really, really important. So one of those basic things, and I'm one of the people that I don't like the smell of lavender. I really don't. It's not one of my favorite things. Give me lilacs, give me gardenias, give me coconut, give me anything like that. But that's not one of my favorite smells. So if it's something that triggers you, there could be things to do with abandonment or other issues rather than being at one. So the opposite of abandonment is atonement or at one. So these are things that you can put on to the body first, or I'll put it sometimes the things I don't like first thing on, and then I'll put things that, will cover it up, so to speak. So I think this is a really, really important thing. So how are you guys liking this body viewer? Have you guys ever seen this actually in action before? Those people that have had the genus. These are really nice things that I find that actually show what we're kind of doing. A lot of times when I'm doing clients, I find it distracting, but I also will put it on and flip it on in my accessory department in the back later, because if I'm actually, which I just did today, I actually was on Zoom and I did an MP3 and an MP4. So I made a visual and I made an audio for my client for 5-10 minutes, and just let the camera, like you're seeing here, look at this. And then that way, if they want to look at it, they can, or they can just use their headphones. So a lot of times we have things where we can send them out as MP3s and 4s, but a lot of times those are, $70 to $100 each to make your own private record player. That's why I usually suggest people go do it themselves. What you're seeing here is, can you see the isolation on the left side? You're seeing the heart, but not only is it picking up something in the heart, it's now picking up something in the acupuncture meridian there, that heart meridian. So again, a lot of people might think that they've got a sore wrist, or they got carpal tunnel, or they're just exhausted, but there's something again on that left side that it's picking up and still working with my client. So I think those are really interesting things. And again, those are some of the different ideas to see what it's doing into that client. My poor client is almost all grayed and washed out here, so when you start seeing and you're trying to run through frequencies through that client, you want to see what's going on and identify that. And again, they may have thought that they had a positive experience, previously with all these, different things like Campbell or other psychedelics or ayahuasca. But you know what? You can also get to a point where it's like antibiotic resistance. Your system's just had enough. It's done what it needed to do. It chelated out. It worked as a purgative to some point. I'd rather do a lot of other things than wanting to vomit. I don't find that therapeutic, but there are a lot of people that this is what they're doing out there for addictions right now. So there are different things. Like I said, you can go in here and see if, we can get a change on the clients. So this is something that's really kind of fun to do. And I wanted to bring to everyone's, attention here. One of the things, I was in one of the biofield practice classes that Selena Fox runs on Synergy. She goes, actually Sherry Squat, but Sherry was running her class, and it was interesting. It was in there with a bunch of people, and they'd been in on the Frequency Friday last week. And a bunch of them told me that they were feeling so much better. But what was interesting is that a lot of people felt it was too intense, because I didn't just do 1 or 2 oils. I did a lot of oils last week, didn't we? And so one of the things in here, when we're looking at, do I want to run all these essential oils to people? And I could go in here and give them this entire list of essential oils here. There's like tons of them. I gave everyone oils last week, but I also have a section in here where I can go into Young Living or doTERRA. And so one of the things I did for fun, and this is like I said, you can go into the libraries, and I happen to have programmed like 4,000 different access things. But let's say if I wanted to go into my Young Living department here, these are all the different blends I could have done. Or today we're giving a gypsum gold. We're giving Juva Cleanse for the liver. We're giving Christmas spirit, a lot of cinnamons and that type of thing. Highest potential, longevity, hope. Okay, a lot of stuff in here for emotional release stuff. Okay, so all those oils were being given to, and they felt it was really intense. So when I actually went to play this, they said, whoa, we have to either have to turn it down, the sound, or back it off a little bit. So how many people, and Nanette said I can feel a strong vibration. So occasionally what happens, and we will see that, is that we have some people say, you know what, it is too strong. So in the back here, I've got 3 stripes here, like candy stripers. And I go back into my what's called frequency, shape, and form down here, wherever it disappeared to. And in my frequency, shape, and form, there's an area here that says how intense. And of course, you can see mine set here, or hard to see. It's on 50. It's how much intensity do I want? Do I want it to sound like chimes or animals? Or what do I want to do? So what I did is you can actually switch it over to here to default. Or if people are really sensitive, switch it over to 10%. Okay? You don't have to blast everyone. I usually like to. And then we ran a whole bunch of other different things, giving her the solfeggio tones for depression. Again, if someone's got, a bit more trauma, you might want to use some square waves here rather than just sine, or let the autopilot go on. So those were interesting things, and you can hear the difference in the tones. Remember, you can't hear most of this. And I can't emphasize that enough. It's not about hearing it. If I'm sending it to you and we are just running it through the frequency, and literally I just have to have it barely audible, so that you don't even have to hear any of this stuff. And what you can do is simply go on and just put it on low. And when you put it on to low here, you know what's going to happen. They will still be picking it up. So now it's in the background. It's still coming in. It's not some little advertising, but you are still receiving the frequency of it. And it's not interfering too much with what I'm talking about. So that's something that's really, really interesting. And, this girl I've been working on for like hour and a half now, and we still can't get that to budge out. So Mary's got a great question. And Mary's question is, do you have anything for mosquito bites? And the answer is, of course, yes, I do. I probably have the biggest venom, anti-venom, and also bites ever developed, actually, on a frequency device. And I actually made that, and I've had it for years. Okay, since I started going into basically biofeedback in 2004, 2005, I actually have that all in here. So I have a whole what's called venom, and I also have a thing for bites. So in my venoms, I know it will be hard to see, but I have a venom department and I have an anti-venom. Okay, so you could go into my venom department and start looking at all the different venoms in there. There's literally thousands of venoms on this planet, by the way. But then again, what's more important? Do I need to look at every venom, or should I look at the anti-venoms? So let's take a look at these anti-venoms here, okay? Milkweed, Augustifolia, which is like a lavender. Also, there are anti-snake or anti-venoms I got from all over. It could be from the Amazon, could be from Africa, could be from North America, could be from India. So I have local plants that are basically the anti-venoms in here. So Artemisia. How many people know what Artemisia is? It's like the ark of whatever. It's called wormwood, or like Chernobyl in the scriptures. So the Artemisia herb is one of the top things in there before nicotine. Mulberry juice. Okay, so different things along in there. There is mountain yarrow. Something called birthwort is in here. Clove, cinnamon, like your thieves oil. Ledum. So if you looked at the actual scriptural oils, ledum, right? Frankincense, myrrh, all those different things, cassia. Those are some of the strongest, Rose of Sharon, cistus, stuff like that. Those are huge. Echinacea, eucalyptus, turmeric, helichrysum, right? All of those are really, really important. And those are all different anti-venoms and stuff in there. So when you start looking quercetin, did you know that basically black cohosh is also called snake root? Okay, how many people have that around? Vitamin C, tobacco, which is your basically within nicotinides, all that. Vinegars have been used as well. White bark. So all of these different things were, moringa, yellow dock, helichrysum, as I said. All these different things are in here. Velvet bean, tons and tons. I got tons and tons and tons and tons and tons. Hundreds of anti-snake and vitamins. And again, chicory, all those sort of things are really nice in here too. Neem oil, bromelain from the pineapple, even using those type of things. So again, there's so many different kinds of venoms in here that we could be looking at. And again, bites come in many different things. They're so weaponized right now, as you know. And if you don't know, your things like Lyme, tick. It's not about deer ticks anymore. It's almost everything is weaponized. Almost all the foods, all the meats are really weaponized. That's why I'm more plant-based for eating and stuff like that. So one of the different things, that is a huge thing that you're going to see. And one of the things I did is I got a hold of those little weaponized little ticky guys. And I actually took all these ticks here. This says Lyme and ticks. These are actual ticks that were put onto a remedy plate. And I have many different remedy plates and stuff like that. But I put the ticks on here, or I'll put the vials of what on here that use for injections. And we try and pull off and reverse engineer as much as we can. Okay, so those are different things. And what you're doing is actually reverse engineering, right? You're bringing it back to 0 point. So in other words, if this particular substance is minus 250, I'm going to use a plus. Whatever I'm going to do, I'm going to try and make my concoction or blend to come to a plus 250. So basically, you're bringing it back to neutralization, harmonization, or what we call 0 point, which is balance, right? So if your system is going into the red and you're going into that, like I said, negative 250, I need to make the right concoction to try and balance it out, to zero it out. And that's actually some of the things that we wanted to look at. So does anyone have any questions in the audience right now? So if you have anything, this is the time to get a hold of me today. And we're going to take a look and see what kind of things that we can come up with. Again, those different ideas of just having bites and stuff like this. There's a whole section I made here. Probably hard to say, but it says anti-venom and bites. So it's not just snake bite, it's any kind of a bite or venom. The other thing too, if you're ever really stuck, if you take actually some essential oil and you can take any kind of a plant, I don't care what it would be. I could go outside and get mullein or plantain or whatever else, but chew it up with your saliva. People have done urine. And another thing simply is to take actually onions, cut up onions, or people have chopped up garlic and onions, and then put it directly on wherever the bite is. And then you're going to put a poultice to it, and then you wrap it with saran wrap. And you, again, put a fresh thing on 2-3 times a day. So those can be really helpful. The other thing is, like I said, the onions are amazing, how much it can actually draw out, with that sulfur and the different things and constitution stuff that we have in there. So those are something that's really kind of fun. So I just wanted to kind of show you some of the fun stuff that we're doing today and kind of, pass some information on. So one of the things to take a look at, we've got some really interesting stuff that will be coming up in here, is that we can look at the emotional part of this. And right now, this is what I want to really focus on, is the emotional part of how we are handling things. It's kind of like looking at the glass half full and half empty. Again, as things are changing, the world is changing, it's expanding. So are a bunch of people's waistlines these days too. It's amazing what we're seeing inside out, outside in, micro and macro, and where we're assimilating it to. And sometimes this is a really great time to do a little bit of juicing And if you don't have a juicer, just to basically put stuff into a blender or NutriBullet. And if you want to take out that bulk, just put it through a sieve or something, or a colander. So right now, a lot of us are in areas that have got heat waves and changes in the environment. So right now, sometimes just balancing out and having less bulk in you, literally physically, is a way to go. So did I say that? Slow-fi. Hi, Karen in chat, just showed up. Cabbage will also draw out metal particulates. I have used cabbage, and sometimes, actually, I used it a lot. People remember when I broke my knee, and I ended up having to teach a medical course the next day, which I changed my entire course syllabus to what I was teaching. Cabbage is also another thing. Like we talked about the leaves, whatever you had. So if you had the leaves of, like I said, mullein or plantain or whatever, I could just go out and get some dandelion leaves. But cabbage is another thing that draws it. Again, stuff that we're using with sulfur and stuff like that. I'm going to say that I don't find that they're actually drawing out so much as the heavy metals. So when we start talking about things like cilantro, you have to take such an awful lot that they're not really pulling out so much as the heavy metals as they are creating a soothing toxicity. Okay, so it's, again, heavy metals as a rule, it's very difficult to get out of the skin right now. And I will tell you one of the reasons why. So if you listen to a lot of stuff I put in earlier and you scoot back to what I gave you with what Sabrina Wallace, these heavy metals and cyber technology and Y bands are actually under the skin. It's an under the skin interstitium, and it's floating through everything right now. So some of that stuff we really can't get out. Okay, so we're trying to do the best that we can. So what we did when we were using things like herbs and stuff like that, what we used 5-10 years ago is not what we use at all today. It has such a limited effect now. And so one of the things too, Mary mentioned about is jewel weed balm. People can use also bear grease. There's all sorts of balm of Gilead's. There's all sorts of those things can be brought back as well. And, you know, when I broke my knee, I had essential, you have to be alkalized. You've got to remember that's the first thing. Before we start going for herbs and oils, you better be going through baking soda or something. If you're not allergic to it, you got to get alkalized on that. And so one of the things, did I actually do my patella? Yes, I did. I broke my knee and I fractured it into many spots. And I've broken 2 ankles, a knee, and a collarbone to this date. And in there, I will say, I never went to the surgeon. I refused to have orthopedic surgery. And actually on my knee injury back in 2019, they got me crutches, and I hobbled to the car and I hobbled down the stairs. I bum walked and I sat on the couch for 5 weeks. And then I went for an x-ray. So those are the things. Like I said, there were a lot of pictures of me. And actually, I taught Genius Biofeedback the next day, by the way. And I was literally, my knee went black and blue. You would actually see the aura where it was actually, and I can bring up the pictures maybe next week of where you can see exactly how black it was in the knee. And I got a lot of people. I taught a lot of things. So we totally taught because people don't know how to triage with this. And it's just, I've had the experience of working in trauma care, in ICUs and stuff like that. And so there is a reason for doing that. So we want to alkalize you first, because once you get into a state of alkalinity, then your system can heal itself. If you do not provide the right materials, like Lego, if you don't have the right, blocks down as the foundation, you can't build the rest of the house. It just doesn't work. You need those enzymes in and different things along that line. And by the way, I didn't eat for about close to 2 weeks. Everything was broths and things along that line, because less is more. Every meal that you eat, it takes 70% of your energy to break that down. So I wanted to go into healing for 2 weeks, not trying to break down some meal. So less is more. So I think that's really, really important. And so, yes, I know all about pain. It was, give me taking children. I would deliver 20 children before I'd go through this again. I have done anesthetic. I have firewalked. I've done all that stuff without anesthetic as well. So in there, like I said, I'm quite well aware. Part of what I did was grate up, actually, things like cabbage and stuff like that, and saran wrap. It looked like I had coleslaw on, but lots of essential oils. And the key was putting in the essential oils, the castor oil, and the hot, wet towel. I don't care about putting on cabbage leaves or even a lot of the ones that I did as a poultice. You need to have the essential oils and then a hot, wet towel and drive it into the tissue, and then you can start working. because otherwise you're just trying to work backwards from the trauma. And most people do not realize it's like dealing with Carrian's law of healing. Okay. So you need to go back and do it in that correct order. So you will make a big difference. That's why I didn't need an orthopedic surgeon, right? And I did mine in front of one of the top integrative doctors, by the way. When I broke my ankle, it was done in front of Dr. Carolyn DeMarco herself, who was a international trainer, integrative medical doctor out here that worked with Dr. Gary Young for numerous years. So if you need to have a witness, she's my witness. And she kept saying, you do this and this. I said, no, it's counterintuitive to what most people will do when I teach them, and especially if you're used to that medical training. You know, when you put essential oils on and you get it in your eyes, you go for olive oil and coconut oil or whatever you want, or castor oil to take it out of the eyes. You don't use water to eye flush it. So sometimes it's counterintuitive to what a lot of people have been drilled into them. You don't have this extra thing. So I think this is really evening. So Brent's in there. How's Brent doing today? And so, yeah, a lot of people have had injuries in here too. So this is really great in here. So Mary said, I heard the tender young unopened seed shoots of plantain taste like asparagus. Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big forager in there. And you notice that after your hair fell out, but you use burdock. Again, a lot of those things are due to alkalinity, radiation, shocks to the system. You know, it's like taking chemo and radiation. You don't realize when that's going to be delayed, or people doing terahertz stuff. You know, you start getting accumulative stuff of that, it can affect people. And so a lot of the things too, you'll see me using thyme and rosemary, things like that. You know, and they're, again, alkalinity. Like I said, when you see, have you ever noticed how many young guys are all shaving their heads? Have you noticed how many men are bald and how many women are thinning their hair? Have you guys noticed that right across the board? Not only is there a weight gain, you're seeing a lot of people without a lot of like thick hair anymore. And that's one of the things when you think of these are like, when we talk about the antennas, right? Like your piloerection and your fission, these are all antennas, guys. They're picking up little things just like Yoda. You know, I feel like the great Gazoo here. I mean, I literally get them to take out at least 2 dustpanfuls every probably 2 months because it's just so thick with my hair. It just can't handle it. But in here, those are some of the things that you can do because, again, there's something wrong in the digestive system. You are basically getting like chemo and radiation. If we are seeing these guys, and I can't get over how many people are, you know, thinning their hair or having brain fog. So again, that's where you want to use the things in here and using the castor oils or using, some people are using pearl powder. There are all sorts of things that we're using in here. But until you add the hot, wet towels, so it's essential oils, castor oil, hot, wet towel, and then plastic bag. And what I did when I did it with my knee, by the way, I just left the towel on for an hour because it went from really, really hot to then warm. And then if you leave it on, it becomes like an ice pack. So a lot of times I would just leave that towel on for literally 45 minutes, an hour. So I went from, you know, it was like Wim Hofing my little knees, you know, whatever you're doing. So make sure you take a look at that. You know, other things you can do, like I said, is putting the poultices if you don't want to, put them on your feet. You know, if there's any hesitancy, even though the injury might be on your arm, your elbow, or whatever, or if you do it on one side, do it on the other, because we're actually built in, like, that's why we do CAT scans, guys. You're in layers. We're like layer cakes here, not chakras, but layer cakes, you know, and that's why you see things being done in cross sections like millimeter, and that's how we need to do it. I've actually had someone where we actually got bit. One of my clients there, you know, I remember when Carl and those guys, right, he got bit on one side, and you know, when I was working on him and where it came out, it wasn't here. It came out on the opposite end. So you don't see the stuff interdimensionally. You don't see things in that stealth or in that outside our visible range. But the damn tick came out on the other side of the arm. Okay? So again, you have to think a little bit that way. That's when I was teaching about vaginal steams and yoni steams and prostate steams, or for children, pediatric or chair steams, right? Because you're going up through each one of these acupuncture meridians all at the same time. And this is really important because in here, that's what you're seeing. So you're going up each one of the acupuncture points, all of them at the same time, not just one. And it has nothing to do with your vagina or your butt. You're going through the root chakra and you're like a tree. It's like that placenta. You're feeding the placenta again from the inside out. So I think that's really cool here. Mary, you've got a comment here. I've watched so many men turning gray in their hair and their beards this year. Yeah, this is the last couple of years. I was really shocked. Actually, a lot of guys now in their 30s and 40s going gray. Have you noticed that? I've noticed that too. Also with women. I've noticed it a lot in the women, actually in their eyebrows and stuff like that. You get up and in the light, you'll see that they're actually, you can see the white and the gray going in there. So it's, interesting. So, I mean, a lot of people too, again, premature aging. That's what's happening. Radiation. This is all radiation basically at some level. So those are some of the things too. And what I found, and I like to do it once or twice a year, is get the herbs, get your tea bags out, and go to a really nice herbal tint, a henna. Okay, not a black one, but put it in there. And I've noticed all of a sudden that just the change in the hair after 20 minutes, it's like putting on, when you want to do castor oil, and then maybe in a couple of weeks I'll do some apple cider vinegar or something to do that. It makes a big change in what's in there. Because it's not just about dry and split ends, it's what's happening, in here. And that's our framing. That's our aura in here in the biofield. So Slow-Fi said, I read about native trackers drafted into NAM. After they got the brush cuts, they lost their tracking senses. Absolutely. And the traditional Chinese medicine said to treat both sides of the body. Now, Brent's got an interesting thing here. I've sworn never to cut my hair more than needed to keep it out of the way. Used to shave head bald in the heat of the summer, working construction, but that was after the heart attack. And Brent said, I saw my first gray hair in my beard at 20-something. Yeah, henna is a protection for the hair cuticle. Now, there's something I want to go back in here. I'm going to go back and take you. How many people have heard of, I did it for about 6 months. It's called Quantum Chit Chat. Do you guys know about that set of stuff on BitChute? You guys heard about my Quantum Chit Chat that I did with Michelle Martin out of the UK with the Genus crew. She's the groups out in there. But Quantum Chit Chat was actually, I did something with her, and I'm going to put it in here. And I'm going to put that channel because I can't put it into Facebook, obviously, but I can put it into the side here. And if you go into the Quantum Chit Chat, what you guys will see is I did a whole thing on hair. Okay. So I talked about what we're actually doing, and that channel's in there now. I never noticed if you don't look, it divided on two lines. It looks like bit and then ute. But anyway, yeah, if you go to the BitChute there, what will happen is that you're going to see on some of the stuff that I did actually about the hair and going into what this was and why. But there's also a lot to be said for what happened is that people would actually shave their hair like after a divorce or after anything trauma and just have a whole new kind of like start in life too. So the hair and stuff like that, I talked into the one, and I'll put that one specifically for you guys in here. But it was literally about going in here and going in and talking about the spiritual strength, how the First Nations, and actually the scouts were used, and they used the First Nations scouts. And when they drafted them in, and you'll hear about the Apache and the Navajo code breakers, by the way. If you know about Tartarian, you're going to know that most of the planet and everything else and the original builders and architects were actually First Nations, by the way. So if you take a look at that, what you're going to see is that when they cut the hair, that's what happened. Okay, is that hair then, when it was cut back, they couldn't track as well. Again, as we're talking about the spiritual part of it and how the military went into this, but also it talks about structures, the styles, the magnetic fields, and also we talked a little bit about the vril and the plating and stuff like that. But some of the original talks in here. So I did a whole talk on that, and I'll put that in the chat room right now. So we did that actually about 2 years ago, but it's still just as valid in here. And I did a whole PowerPoint in there about the psychic power of the hair and the adornments and stuff like that, and getting it in and out of these, as I called, hairy situations, which were kind of cool. So those were some of the fun things we kind of looked at in here. So do take a look at that. I'm going to put that into the live stream right now. So on that, and you got to remember, I don't know if you guys know about that, but a lot of times, and this only goes back seriously like 15 years ago or so, 20, and I'm sure they're still doing it to some degree. When you were put into and incarcerated against your will into psychiatric facilities, and there was one that was called the basically the Saskatchewan hospital, which was basically like an MK Ultra torture center where they still do shock and they used to do lobotomies, but it was the MK Ultra, but it's called in North Battleford. So it was called the Regional Psychiatric Facility and Hospital there. And what happened is they were still actually putting people and making them do lice. And if you didn't comply with some of their stuff or their hair treatments, you were actually put into isolation. So some of this weird stuff still goes on today, and forcing people to do that, on there. There's a lot to be said for that. But having said that, a lot of people use fake extensions. And I just actually watched a show where a woman was thinning her hair. And these extensions that they wove in was $8,400 worth of hair extensions. I'm like, good gosh, how many people that would feed. So any of the ones in here I just put in there was to take a look at that. And let's just see if we can take a look here. Because a lot of people, like I said, they just don't realize the totality and the enormous how we're built. They just don't get this. I'm going to try screen sharing here. Let's see if it will let me do the screen share here. Hopefully it will. And you're going to see basically going into what we have here. And in the live stream, like I said, when people don't realize that how important this is, to go in, you're going to see hopefully my bit shoot there a bit, you guys. This is actually the one on basically what we have here for quantum chit chat. And that power of the hair is so, so important. And how we're basically, and I was in kind of one of those moves. So you'll see me put, it's a hairy situation ahead of time, a hilarious situation. So again, this is a really, I think, decent talk that I did just for fun, just to the groups here, for the Genius Biofeedback. Because, in here, the hair is our antenna. And again, so important to use clean things, don't use GMOs, what the difference between hair tinting, hair printing, and what a color is versus a dye. So again, in here, I started talking about actually the actual tension and the strength that we have here in hair strength and stuff like that. I get into really kind of cool stuff in here. But not only was it during Vietnam and special forces, right? But they sent all their undercover experts in to go look for recruits among the, again, First Nations that were blessed to have these supernatural tracking abilities right here. And surprise, 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 once they recruited, made them into skinheads, there you go. They lost that ability to be able to detect and sense the enemy. Again, it's just a biofield thing. But I think there's a lot to be said for, cleaning things up here. So take a look through there, and there's a lot of stuff in here. And this is some of the things that happen with the veterans and post-traumatic stress. Okay, do you notice a lot of them in there, what's happened? And it was interesting, if you actually looked at some of the things called men that stare at goats, what's happening to them, right? You'll see a lot of them in the movie that they actually went back looking like hippies, right? That's what they wanted to do for the special forces, right? In the psionic defense there. So I thought that was interesting, kind of like the X-Files. But when it gets to its mature length, you're also then bringing through phosphorus, calcium, and vitamin D. Okay, and lymphatics, that whole spinal fluid, the whole thing to do with the 12 senses in there. And also went into some of the more Ayurvedic and from a yogic, perspective in here. I talked a little bit about the women of the Vril Society and Maria Osterich and stuff like that in 1917. Kind of cool. I just thought about that. That's actually when Anastasia, the Duchess, actually, when that happened in Russia as well. But you're going to see, different things in occultism and stuff like that, that they used these women as psychics, transmitter, mediumships, whatever you want to call, in those secret Germanic Templar areas and stuff like that, because they use that. And they use these documents, talk about the telepathic messages from Aldebaran and stuff like that. So I think it's kind of interesting too. So I kind of went all over the place, but this is some of the things that you'll see me talk about in here. And also the minerals and constitutions and stuff like that. So do take a look at that, because as you can see, that was my hair like 2 years ago, and I've taken it off too. Sometimes you just need a break with stuff too. Also what you comb your hair with, things like that, and brushing. And one of the most important things as well, I was the rep for the Body Soul Spirit Expo for about 8-10 years for Western Canada. And you know how people went to tarot card readers and, you know, psychics and this and that and palm readers and whatever, card readers. It was interesting. Ted was actually one of the top people I'd ever been to. And you know what he read? Get this. He was a hair reader. And so this guy from Newark in New York was actually flown all over into Dubai by all the sheiks and stuff like that. He was flown out into Egypt and everything. He was known to be one of the top psychics, but what he did is he read hair. And he stayed a couple extra days, and I was having a potlatch over. He says, can I come? I said, well, of course, why not? So, you know, you tell people to be there at whatever, 5 o'clock for supper. He shows up at 3:30. That's okay. I just come out of the shower, right? He said, there you go, have some tea, have whatever, and I'll, you know, some food or whatever I'd cut up, and I'll see you in 20 minutes or whatever. Amuse yourself, right? And he says, come back here, don't blow your hair. And I went, what? He says, don't do your hair. And so he literally, I joke not, finger combed my hair for 40 minutes. And the energy he would get, and again, what you're reading is you're reading your entire life history up in here in the crown chakra, as opposed to the root or touching someone else, like off the heart, or when you're doing cards and stuff, you're only dealing on this chakra. So it was interesting for him to do connections, hold this or connect and do things in this life or past life regressions and what he would get. So, and I tell you, I have never had to this day, I could brush my hair and comb my hair, but there was something about just stimulating all the natural oils, you know, and I totally encourage something like that. And of course, how many of you seen the actual hair? Have you seen actually the hair spas where you actually, there's two different things in Ayurvedic or Panchakarma, which I do, and I have a Panchakarma library in here. But one would be when you lie down kind of on a massage table, and we have a little tray underneath, almost like you're sitting back at a hair salon. You know how you lean back, but this is, you could do in on a massage table or similar to a hospital bed, how we would wash people's hair in there. So you can, and actually I went and got from Amazon some blow up little plastic ones in case I ever need to do it, because to get some of these tables are thousands of dollars, but you would actually run basically like an IV bag or a copper vessel, and it would drip castor oil or ghee on the third eye. So you actually would put like a hairband here, a covering, so nothing would come into the eyes, and you sit there for half an hour to an hour just dropping warm oil or even warm milk on the third eye. And so this is a huge thing that is absolutely incredible. So these are some of the different libraries I have as well in my Panchakarma Genius libraries, because that is known one of the best things for stimulating warm milk, warm essential oils. And again, you can, I devised my own, I made up my own version, but those are things that you will see that make a huge difference. Also in Asia, you know those sprinklers that, you know, when you go outside and put them on your lawn and they go back and forth, they oscillate back and forth. Well, this is actually a head halo that goes back and forth with warm water or warm milk or warm oils. And you do this for about half an hour, 45 minutes. This is where you like to pay them $200 an hour to do this stuff. Okay. And again, what you're doing is you're relaxing and you're cleansing through the auric field here, right? So that's what you're dealing with, is basically the 5th, 6th, and 7th A chakra, trying to clean out and purge that out like smudging. So have you guys ever seen it? It's absolutely amazing. And so I've made and MacGyvered my own version of it. And so those are things in there. So like I said, I've put a few of these things on my Facebook, and to see basically what a head spa looks like, it's pretty damn fun and, you know, very interesting if you haven't seen that. So again, you can always make things up, you know, and don't think that you have to have it exactly as someone else did. I veganized some of my stuff. I may not want, there are a lot of people that don't want butter or stuff from cows or geese. You know, there are a lot of things like instead of putting, you can actually get, which they will build up almost like a mud or actually a clay. Actually, it looks more like dough. It's like bread dough. You'll put it around the eyes here. And so what I did is I went and got safety goggles, but that didn't have holes on the side. Do you know how difficult that is to find safety goggles without eye holes, or basically similar to if you're going swimming, to a little bit like eye goggles when you're going swimming, diving. And so what happens is you can actually open up the top, and they would actually put ghee or you could use castor oil or something like that. And you actually are in there for half an hour and it pulls the toxins out. Okay, so it's a poultice for the eyes. So a lot of people, if you haven't seen this, this is very cool stuff to do. You know, and again, you got to think outside the box. And there's a lot to be said for these, you know, incredible things. Like when you're doing the, you know, hair halo, and you're doing the basically a water spa, this is absolutely incredible. And so, like I said, actually, I'm going to find one in here for you. If you've never seen them, it's beyond that. And you can actually go to, in the top clinics, you won't see them so much in the smaller cities, but in the large ones in here, basically, I'm going to show you this because if you haven't seen it, it's really cool here. So I'm going to show you what this kind of looks like because it's incredible. And you can literally MacGyver this. I have figured out how to basically bandage, you know, almost everything here. It's like, you know, Tim the Tool Man here. But, you know, if you want to, you can take a look at some of this. So I'm going to play this just so you get an idea of what we're talking about. Because a lot of times I'll say things and people have no idea what I'm talking about at the best of times. So let's go in here and let's take a look here, okay? So take a look at what's actually happening here. And in here, what you're doing is you can see there's a halo going on here. And basically what it does is it's dripping on here. Let's see if we can get back up here. There we go. So you guys should be able to see that now. So you can see how you can do water. You can do mineral waters, right? You can do a light oil. It reminds me like those old lava lamps and those oil lamps in a bit. But most of this is usually water, or they'll use like a ghee or a milk, just a really nice like coconut warmed milk. Or we could do minerals and waters. But is that not like relaxing? Like how wonderful does that look, right? It's pretty, you know, impressive when you get into some of this. So like I said, these water halos in here, if you've never seen these kind of things, again, be open to some of these ideas because there's so much stuff out there. It's absolutely amazing, you know, and you're going to see basically what people are doing here. These, again, are things that you could do at home, or like I said, try and figure out how to, you know, make something at home. You know, it's not difficult. So let's look at a bigger one in here. Okay, so let's play with this. I just love this. Okay, does that not just look like tempting? Now, again, there's a lot to be said for shedding and stuff. So know your therapist, okay? This is what I would do, again, in the center in my clinic. So whether you did essential oils or you're using different textures, there's the tuning forks. Did you see the weighted tuning fork she's using there? And again, I also would bring in my frequency Tesla like violet ray. And I love these. If you haven't seen that little thing, what we were talking about, it's like a little copper wire. You put it onto the head, and this is just an amazing time. So this is part of what I do with my clients over there. And like I said, you can get little basically head or massage table, or for a bed or a couch, or wherever you want. And you can get these little, they use them for hair shampoos, right? Look at all those stuff that they're playing with in there. Now, this is where we're going into some fun stuff with the sound therapy, right? So adding some of this in. So let's take a look and see what, you know, we've got here. Is that not kind of fun? Okay. And then getting your essential oils in. This is what you can do by self-pampering. Again, these kind of little gowns are also used in there. But again, all the different modalities. Okay. You can do smudging, and again, playing. What you can't hear, and actually maybe what I'll do is just stop that, and so you can actually hear this. I'll take the sound so you can actually hear this. Can you hear that? She's actually got all those things on because she's using the silver and the golds and minerals and like that in there, just like you're using copper and stuff like that. But they're using the different sound therapy, you know. So is this not just relaxing just to even look at this? Look at this. Okay. Now, these days, unless my clients are cleaned, don't have anything that really can pick up, I would be using nitrile gloves. I never touch anyone with hands anymore. There's just still too much being picked up in there. So there's nothing wrong with using nitrile gloves, by the way. So they're latex free. So do take a look at that. Isn't that amazing? So you're getting the sound, the smell, all your senses. Isn't that funny? Now it just started pouring here. Just as I started talking about the rain, the sound, and the smell, it just started pouring like a tin roof here. And again, using different things. Of course, don't do the ostriches. But anyway, a lot of things with neonics and stuff like that. But again, using the whole sound, I want you to take a look at how that's being done. And then these things actually can come up. So these things are not cheap, by the way. They're probably about $3,000-$4,000 the way they make them. But then I figured out how to kind of do it a different way. And again, using color therapy. Okay, all the different things like that. Okay, now that's what I call a spa clinic, right? Isn't that just wonderful? And washing off there. So there you go. Was that not something very cool to see? I tell you. Okay. There's so many things to explore if you haven't looked at that. And like I said, that alone is used for anxiety and depression, right? Just the smells, the sound, and just that gentle tapping over the forehead, just like mom stroking you. Okay. There's a lot to be said, like going back. That's like rewombing in a way. That's like doing water therapy when we're doing similar to breath work and stuff like that. So, one of the things too is when you get the panchakarma and stuff like that, is in the panchakarma Ayurvedic centers, you can actually go in and you'll see some of these different things as well, you know. And if you have not seen some of the different modalities, then maybe we need to look at this and revisit some of this stuff, because a lot of people are so tied into the Western modality of what you're supposed to be doing. It's ridiculous. They have not looked and not explored, or what's the natural version of this, you know. So when you start looking at, you know, some of the things in the Panchakarma, you know, how to do things even at home, there are so many different ways. Like I said, you can set up something. I could go get a sprinkler from like the dollar store or something like that and reinvent some of these different techniques. You know, there are so many different things on how to do self-healing, you know, on here. And again, explore this. If you haven't looked at some of these, and this is where we need to look at other modalities. And your Ayurvedic and your Panchakarma are almost about the same thing as what you're seeing here in actually Russian medicine. A lot of Russian and traditional Chinese medicine is almost identical. And so these are different things, again, to explore and take a look at. So I'm just going to show you something here again, just so we can have a clear vision of what I'm trying to talk to you about. And again, put any questions that we have in here. Mary says, I have a large plastic pointy horse combs for scalp stimulation. I really think there's a lot to be said for actually using the Tesla frequency ones, and I'll show you even just an inexpensive version instead. What's some version better than a $3,000 version? We can find you something for $50 too. They do work, you know, maybe not to the full capacity, but something is better than nothing in some of mine. So one of the things I'm going to show you on here is, let's just take a look at that. So let's go into my, and again, as you can see, Panchakarma. So take a look here. Can you see what we're doing? Okay, they're using the oil or warmed milk. And again, this is how they deal with things instead of taking you to a psychologist, life coach, or my gosh forbid, a psychiatrist. What the hell do they know? So anyway, you can see how the different herbs and oils, they're marinated. Look at those tables. That's why they're $3,000 tables in there. I want you to take a look. Can you see how they're dripping the oil? Right? And it's effective. This is how they deal with things for mind, body, spirit. Okay? I can go down to the dollar store. I can drill a hole in it. I can put a little wick in there, right? And you can fill it up with warm stuff. Okay? I want you to think of how you can reinvent this. Okay? And that's what I did. Okay? So whether you get a copper container, a terracotta container, you get a brass container, it's all great. So I want you to take a look at these, because I showed you a little bit about how wonderful these different therapies are. These are built into my genius, by the way. All these different therapies are built in. and how you go into it. So let's take a look again. Okay, using herbs in here. And almost like a yoni pearl. Can you see how big they make it? They put the herbs there, open a whole bunch of tea leaves and essential oils and salts in there and make a big thing and wet it down with some castor oil, and they start just massaging you. Okay, so all these different versions are in here. Okay, they use enemas. They use basically neti pots. The only thing I don't do is obviously I'm not going to do any leeching. Okay, but these are the very basics to health. And like I said, most people don't know it. The one I wanted to bring you up here, I talked a little bit about this. This is just being used on the back where there's a sore spot. It could be used on the face. It could be used on the stomach, like a castor oil pack. So they build up, feels like, looking like, Play-Doh or something, but it's actually made out of kind of like a bread dough. And they build it up. But there are different ways to do this. And again, you're putting the ghee in, or if you don't have that, you can actually warm up castor oil or neem oil or even sesame oil, things like that, even an olive oil. Something is better than nothing. Okay, so take a look at some of these different ideas because they're time proven. Okay, and they work really great for extraction, and for relaxation. So again, if you want to grind up some essential oils or you want to use some of the spices, have at her. This is really cool. So I wanted to give you some of the different ideas in there. And one of the things we'll look at as well is when I want to look at, let's say, these Tesla, and again, that's a bantered word, but I don't actually want to use it. We're just going to use basically a high frequency glass probe or comb. And this is, again, something that you, again, can look up here. And I'll just type it up and we'll show you what I'm talking about. And if you've got any questions, this is the time to do it. And otherwise, we'll be done in a few minutes for today on our Frequency Friday. And we're going to go into what can we do high frequency and basically wands. Okay, so you will see these kind of wands all over the place here. And I'm going to talk a little bit about it. Here we go. Let's just do a little bit of screen sharing here. And again, I love using the Tesla rays. There's nothing better than using the old analog stuff. But if you don't have access to it, like I said, there's a big difference between $50 and going into this. So these are basically wands you can get, not terahertz, but they're basically used in the industry here for facials. And if you get into an actual Tesla ray, violet ray, these ones, again, as a rule, are between $50 to about $150. Those are basically the 7 best, let's say, whatever frequency ones. It's not just about hair growth. It's about all sorts of stuff for skin, dental, everywhere. If you've got funguses, you got all sorts of stuff here. So these are all available here. So the difference between going into, let's say, a Tesla violet ray, let's take a look at that. The Tesla violet, oops, cannot spell, which I never do spell anyway, violet ray, let's take a look at those. Look at the difference on here. Okay, so this is the difference, but you're going to see argon or the plasma rays in there. Okay, so these, again, are available at different lengths, different price points. Okay, and I have found them to be very, very helpful. Okay, so take a look at these because, like I said, it's great to have the original stuff. But if you don't have it, I have used these and had excellent, excellent results myself. Okay, they're like a little zapper. You literally smell the ozone. I mean, and that is just absolutely incredible. You can smell the actual ozone on here. And so a lot of these different things are used in clinics. They were used by doctors for like ever. And so once you go in here, like I said, there's some interesting stuff. And I was doing some amazing stuff with the oscillating Lakovsky waves I was looking at last night. I was like, oh, I need to build one of these things. I got to do something. Something is fun. And I was listening to Robert Bauer talk with Zish today here. So I want you to take a look at the Tesla rays here. So let's just look here. Again, if you're not aware of what we're talking about, these are the very cool stuff. Again, this is how doctors worked till the 1920s. Do you know every doctor and chiropractor, this was their kit? All the doctors, they actually had, these were in all the hospitals, by the way, till just about the 1920s. And I'm talking almost every hospital was in there. So again, when you don't know what you don't know, this is amazing stuff in here. Okay, and it's sometimes hard, but they're making it a comeback right now. This is absolutely incredible. So you would actually use some of these different technologies. And again, you're seeing, again, a little bit of zapping.
On my face.
Can you hear the
Anybody
zapping?
that's had a facial currently today would know the smell, because this is actually used in estheticians' offices today for facials. You would want to use the machine for 3 or 4 minutes maximum. And then you would let the machine cool down before you use it again, because you don't want to put pressure on the capacitor. Next, you would want to work on the central nervous system, which is right
now look there.
And if there's any type of a spine or a back problem or a shoulder problem, you can come down the spine on either side of the spine. I prefer to do this on the skin rather than through fabric, but it's totally up to you. If you choose.
So again, natural fabrics. Okay, get this. Look at that. 50 different manufacturers for the violet rays with 35 glass attachments, depending on what was going on. Okay, are we missing something today? I think so. Okay, they had ones that went into the vagina, the rectum, all your different things. So this is some of the original kind of technology. Like I said, people have a lot to catch up on if you haven't looked at some of this. So anyway, I'm going to put a couple of these just so you can take a look at it and look them up. You know, like I said, have some fun. Think outside of the box. If we got any questions for today, I'm just going to check in there. And again, I'm going to put in my biofeedback in there. Okay, so if you haven't looked at my Facebook, I'm just going to run that here quickly for you. So do take a look at that. Let's slide over here to my Facebook. Welcome to Facebook. Karenann MacDonald. Have fun getting you on. You can send me a message, but otherwise, if you need to want to join it, please join me at KA for Karenann Lusick, and I will add you there. But as we go back into this channel and we go back into the photo albums, okay, look at the amount of information we have here. There's a whole section on frequency, on oils, on different fun things in here. So all these things I'm showing you today are in here, and where to get them and where to play with some of this. So if you don't know what's going on, like I said, it's making such a difference on there. So there's some of the plasma ray. And so again, those frequency devices we're showing you in those wands are kind of within this spectrum. So do take a look at that. And like I said, they're code books. There's more than enough books out there if you don't know about this. And what you're doing is you're changing the biofield. And again, these are some of the very, very important things as we run these different herbs and oils into you. I want you to take a look at the different waves and stuff like that we're using within our sound generators and oscillators, the Genius. So don't think of it as a rife per se. I want you to think as a tuning fork, a day of atonement, playing with the different waveforms. And this is what's really amazing here, because you're spinning and changing the different biofields as you need to. So those are some really cool things today. So hopefully you guys have learned a few things. I want to thank you for joining me. I'm Karenann Lusick MacDonald. And if you would like to have any sessions, with me, certainly get a hold of me. I showed you at the Karenann MacDonald here. And one of the options that you can use here, I'll just get you my email as well. So those people that are on Gmail, you can go right here. You'll see basically that we have got here clanmother13 at Gmail, KLAN mother13 at Gmail. Okay, so those are some of the things you can get a hold of me. There's also, if you would like to try this out, and if you haven't tried it out or you want to get a hold of me, simply go to clicking this on or go to insighthealthapps.com. And if you want to meet with me as one of their therapists or lead instructors, you can get a hold of me through there. If you just want to play with this, there's a Google and an Apple version. So again, if you want to play with any of these things or get a hold of me, there you go. And you can start your own as well. So if it's something you want to just take a look at, again, there's so many things we can look at biofields without actually doing therapy. I mean, I can take a picture of you without touching you and, not doing therapy. So a lot of people, like I said, this is not about putting extra waveforms, electrical magnetics at all. We simply can take a picture of the actual biofilm and the biofield and all sorts of things within you, just with the different trivector and trinary computer systems that we have that are more advanced. These are not usually, your public kind of computer. So we have this kind of technology built in. So I thank you again. I'll just put my email here again. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to give me a call, or someone that wants to do a session 99. You do not have to come to me. Everyone thinks they need to be near me. No. FaceTime, I do Telegram, I do MeWe, all those things, even phone consults. Again, it's more about that. If I can hear you and you can hear me, the therapy is going to work. So let's do a couple tuning forks before we leave today. I'm going to have you take some really nice deep breaths. We'll have the Genius just playing in the background here as well. And we're going to have it playing low, not too intense for you guys. So we'll get that going here. And then what we're going to do, we're going to go through the tuning forks. So I'm going to have you do something a little different for me today, okay? And she goes, now what is she going to do? Okay, so one of the things in there, what I would like you to do is actually, when I hit the tuning fork, I want you to actually do the toning for it, okay? So we're going to go through all these different tuning forks one by one, okay? It's like my collection here. Anyway, we're going to go through each one, and we're going to start here. So let's start at the very beginning. This is like, and maybe it's because I went to go see The Sound of Music the other day, and I still have it in with me, right? Doe a deer, a female deer. So it was like doe a deer. Or when I trained with Dr. Len Horowitz and all those people and got into like the forks and music more so, and Jonathan Goldman and all the solfeggio tones and Sound Oasis stuff back then, right? It was ut, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to hit this. And again, we're going to be in the 174 range. Again, lower chakras. So you guys ready? So get low. When you do it at home. Okay, so this will go right through the entire system, you guys. We're going to have a little fun today. So that was our F174. Now we're going to go into another one. It 285. Remember, you may not be hearing it, but you are picking it up in the field. It's just outside your audible. So don't think we can't play with it. 396. Oot. Ooh. Is this not fun for today? Okay, so our next one we're going to go is Ray, a drop of golden sun. That's why it's gold. 417. What are we doing? We're doing Ray. One more time. Scream it out loud. Ray. Do you notice what I'm doing? Okay, when I bring it in, I'm listening to it to get the pitch. It's like piano, or when you're doing music, right? You're getting the pitch. Okay. We're getting the idea now. Having a little fun here. Okay, so if you've got some other forks here, right? 432. Okay, so as we're going through each one of these, again, it's a learning experience, right? It's all fun and games, right? And you get to have some fun here. So we're going to go to the 639. Oh, a long way to run. Should have had some water. I'd be doing better than sounding like a frog right now. Okay, do, re, mi. So we're going to go to mi at 528. You guys ready? As loud as you can. Mi. Needle pulling thread. Okay, so I want you to get in and start playing with this. I don't care how goofy it is. I don't care what sound you make, whether you want to go through lum, yum, rum, right? Or we do some kirtan or whatever it is you want to do, whatever floats your boat. Okay, get some of these tuning forks. Again, it's not about doing it all out here. It's about you listening to the pitch. 741, 7th chakra, getting to the 8th, right? So then you can get a bunch of them, and then you can put a whole bunch in your fingers and hands. Okay, it's an easy way. You don't have to go to school for this. You don't have to be a musician. Okay, you can get hang drums, but look how easy this is. It all sounded like something. Okay. Okay, and what you're getting is the bioresonancy. These are going to be very high. They're going to be up in the 4,000s, you guys. Called the angelic realms. The more you clean out, the more you play with fun things like this, the better you can help people around you. Okay, I could be sitting here doing the biofeedback because you see what I'm doing back here with the clients, doing this at the same time on and off, right? Cleaning the biofield. Okay. Then when we get into the fun ones and you get into the weighted ones in here, right? Cute little ones in there. There you go. This is like vibrating. This is like having a vibrator. You could put it onto any acupuncture point, let me tell you. You will feel it. Having dental issues? Headaches? You want to do essential oils with frankincense and start going around your acupuncture points. Okay, wherever you think you need to. Headaches, back of the neck, tummy, gaining some weight, put some essential oils on your tummy and start going through those acupuncture meridians through the abdominal area. Okay, so those are a few things of my favorite things today. So we're going to leave you with that. And we will send you our love here from the Sinayak and Slocan motherlands of the Vahalas here. So Carly says, thank you so much, Karen. Great info as usual. Love the tuning forks. How many of you guys have actually, since I started showing you this a couple months ago, how many of you have actually gotten tuning forks in the last 4 to 8 weeks? So tell me if you have. Is there something that you have learned? What did you get in the last couple things? Did you get baking soda? Did you get an essential oil kit? What have you done different here? Carolee says, yes. Well, what did you get? Okay, so some of the things in here. Thank you, Mary. Thank you, Karen. And you always share so much information. Much appreciated. Okay, so tell me what you got what did you get in the last 4 to 6 weeks here? Did you pick up anything to add into your repertoire? Did you pick up anything for those ingredients of the recipes to pamper yourself? So this is what the things we need to do. It's not about being a therapist. It's about self-love and having those simple tools. You literally can get one of those forks I was showing you for $5, $10 on Amazon. Even if there's something really basic, right up to sliders, you can get them with actually crystals on the bottom with boots on them. Okay, so they can go anywhere. I've seen them from like probably $10 up to $200. You can also get into glass ones and crystal and quartz ones as well. Just like you see crystal bowls, we have crystal tuning forks as well. Brent says he's got some essential oils again, using them. And how's that back doing there, Brent? This is little bits by little bits in here. Tuning forks, essential oils, and a book on colonics. Great for you. Great book, Bernard Jensen, Tissue Management, Better Bowel Tissue Management. We'll talk about that. I think I'm going on to colonics next week. So I want you to learn everything you can. I'm giving you a heads up for next week. We're going to look up the difference between enemas. We're going to talk about basically what a Colema board, Colema is. We're going to talk about the Woods method. We're going to talk about, now that I'm onto it, Bernard Jensen. We're going to talk about why we're doing the face reading, why I made an iridology scanner here, and how the bowel and the gut or the brain gut connection is. So we'll talk a little bit about that, and colon hydrotherapy, seeing as that was the favorite thing that I like to take off on mine. So from Project Ascension. Mary says, I've been digging in the dirt and going barefoot. Excellent things to do these days. So again, make sure you got your aloe vera, make sure you're screened up. There's a lot of stuff coming in. And if you want some funky stuff, I put the stuff to do with synergy groups. But also if you want to look up the Atlas 31 coming in, there's a lot of stuff I've put out. And David Sarita's got some very cool information that we just talked about. So take a look at that, and we will see you guys later, right? Okay, next Friday, 5 o'clock. Oh, Brett said, I felt a slight twist this evening from picking up raspberries since before sunup. Interesting. So again, put those essential oils on the feet, slather your feet, little castor oil, hot wet towel, same thing. If I wanted to put something on here and I didn't have a massage therapist, right? I put the plastic bag down on the bed or the massage table. Then we put a hot, wet towel. You need, like, literally, it's that hot that I need to use those big, massive rubber gloves and wring it out. Put the essential oils on, and boom, Bob's your uncle. You just lie down flat. That's how you do it for self-care. Okay? So next week, we're going to talk all about water hydrology, and I'm going to bring up the book called Water and Salt, The Essence of Life, and we'll talk a little bit about Veda Austin's work and Dr. Emoto's work. And David Avocado Wolf, Victor Schauberger. We're going to tie in the water with the colon and what we're going to be doing. And then with the genius, how you can use the genius with your remedy plates and how many ways Karen does with the water. Okay, so we're going to start with that. That's your homework. So if you want to take a look at some of the stuff again at Quantum Chit Chat, there's a section on that we'll be going through. So lots of love. And don't forget, those of you with genius, or if you want to, Denise Arminio is teaching. If you go to ilovemygenius.com, sign up for free, or go Insight Health Apps, or contact me. There is a free class this Thursday coming up at 11 o'clock Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. So if you want to get in there, and I think she will probably be doing a free demo as well. So if you get that ready, I'll probably be in the chat room. Again, we will have that available as well. So thanks a lot. We'll be with you soon. Ciao.